A lot of discussion around bear defense revolves around what guns are bad and which are good for the task. So I'm going to start off with 3 commonly stated things that I believe to be myths. Those myths being that hitting a bear with buckshot past 5 yards will be totally ineffective, that .30-06 is the minimum rifle caliber for bear defense, and that .44 Magnum is the minimum handgun caliber for bear defense. The origin of these myths appear to be a study in which bullets were shot into a silt and sawdust mixture to test penetration. When you shoot something that isn't even remotely like a bear, the results obviously don't apply to bears. These myths about buckshot, .30-06, and .44 Magnum are then repeated by government websites and other seemingly credible sources. This article, for example, says that .30-06 is the minimum caliber that you should use for hunting Kodiak brown bears. Now, the idea of a minimum caliber is fundamentally flawed because the same type of bullet can penetrate to different depths depending on the velocity that it hits the bear at. With almost every expanding rifle bullet available today, more velocity means less penetration. So with certain hunting bullets, they will fragment on impact and therefore penetrate very shallowly when shot at close range from a 300 Win Mag. But when you shoot those same bullets from a .308 with a 16-inch barrel, they will have deep penetration. It would be far more useful to have a minimum penetration requirement instead of a minimum caliber requirement to make sure the bullet is actually capable of hitting the vitals. This website says that buckshot is lacking penetration and consequently effectiveness compared to deeper penetrating Brennecke type shotgun slugs. In reality, certain buckshot can penetrate just as deep as certain Brennecke slugs. This demonstrates why blanket statements are bad, because they provide a rule but not the exceptions to the rule. Of course, buckshot is naturally somewhat inconsistent in penetration, but the real problem is that the pellets are made out of soft lead and are more prone to deforming when they hit bone. If you were to use triple-aught buckshot made from hard-cast lead, it would basically solve any penetration or deformation issues. As far as distance goes, there is no reason why double-aught buck can't kill a bear at 6 yards when a .22 can kill a bear at about 33 yards. Regular expanding shotgun slugs don't penetrate deep enough and are also made out of soft lead. The managed recoil Remington Slugger is an interesting example of how deep a regular soft lead slug can penetrate when it's moving slow enough to not expand. Now, let's talk about handguns. You want a round that can punch through a bear skull and that has straight and deep penetration through flesh. Tyler Friel from Outdoor Life also explained that the more powerful calibers have diminishing returns as they are accomplishing essentially the same thing that less powerful calibers are. This 10mm extreme penetrator bullet lost about 10 inches of penetration due to entering and exiting a smaller grizzly skull. This is an amount that is surprisingly small, given the fact that 2 layers of human skin is equal to about 8 inches of 10% gelatin. In a previous video, I mentioned the fact that extreme penetrator bullets are not the best for deep penetration of flesh or hard objects. So a different projectile would likely do better, especially if it didn't tumble like this bullet did. This is a chart of various rounds and their penetration. More penetration is always better for a bear defense handgun. You'll notice that many of these rounds say HCFN, which means hardcast flat nose. I want you to look at the .44 Magnum round. It's the third from the bottom of the chart, and it had 45.5 inches of penetration from a 3-inch barrel. Now, when we look at the Plus P 9mm and the 40 Smith & Wesson, with basically the same barrel length, both of these rounds outpenetrate the .44 Magnum. The smaller diameter bullets simply require less energy to go farther than a larger diameter bullet like a .44 Magnum. Granted, there is always some variance in penetration due to the velocity being slightly different for every individual round. If it was something like insufficient barrel length that caused powerful calibers to penetrate less deeply, then the 45 plus B at the top of the chart would not be outperformed by the plus B 9mm. It's only when you step up to the 45 super round that it has enough energy to overcome its increased diameter. By the way, all of these tests on this chart were done in clear ballistics gel. So, a 44 Magnum definitely isn't required to be able to kill a bear. Other calibers like 9mm have been successfully used to stop bear attacks. Believing myths can lead to people like Jay Reeves thinking he shouldn't bother to carry his .357 Magnum because it'll be useless against a bear. Because of this, Jay was unarmed when he was attacked and killed by a bear. We can't say for sure that carrying a pistol will have saved Jay's life, but in general, handguns with hard-cast lead ammo are definitely effective against bears. I'd like to highlight a couple of attacks that we can learn from. Greg Brush saw a bear within 15 yards. He drew his .454 Casull revolver and shot from the hip at the charging bear, stopping it just before it reached him. First of all, Greg did a good job firing as many rounds as he did with such limited time and with Second of all, revolvers can jam, contrary to popular belief. Finally, you may need more than 5 or 6 shots. This is regardless of how powerful those rounds are, and this is simply due to the fact that you may miss once or twice. Now let's compare that to a different bear attack. There was an aggressive bear trying to break into Jim Landis's home. He shot the bear 7 times with a .45. The bear ran about 50 feet, which is 16 yards, before it collapsed. Now I have to ask you, was the .454 Casull in the previous attack any more effective than the .45 in this attack? With what we know, they were both effective at quickly stopping the attack. For example, there was little difference in the distance that the bears traveled before they were stopped. Now I've explained in a previous video that the distance an animal travels after being shot is not the best way to measure effectiveness. But how long an animal survives after being shot is a much better way to measure effectiveness. Since neither encounter was timed, we just have to compare distance instead. Many people assume that a bear defense gun needs to be very powerful, the logic being that if you only have time for one shot, something like a .375 H&H would only need 1 round to stop an attack. It just doesn't work this way though. Scott Oberlittner and his hunting partner both shot a charging grizzly. Scott had a .375 H&H Magnum rifle. The fact that the .375 H&H failed to even slow down the bear led Scott to conclude it just goes to show it doesn't matter how big a gun you have. Scott unfortunately got mauled during this attack, but he had a hunting partner that shot and killed the bear. Seeing this, it's easy to conclude that a good hunting partner is very important and that the caliber of your rifle is relatively much less important. Furthermore, as Tyler Friel explains, some bears can take many rounds of .375 H&H before they die. Since bears can take many rounds with little or no effect, Tyler concludes that guns with superior capacity that also let you shoot fast and accurately are obviously better. All of these weapons were fired by the same shooter at a moving target meant to simulate a charging bear. A heavy recoiling weapon that's slow to fire may only give you the time to fire one shot, while a better weapon gives you the ability to fire multiple shots within the same amount of time. It is for this reason that I would never carry a single action only revolver in bear country. Now, I've seen some people say that rifles and shotguns are much more effective than handguns. Therefore, they conclude that you don't even need a handgun, only a rifle or a shotgun. Now, rifles and shotguns are much easier to shoot accurately and make much larger wounds than handguns, so they are definitely more effective in those ways. But as far as killing quicker, even large game seem to die in roughly the same amount of time, whether they are shot with a handgun or a powerful rifle. I have another video where I explain the biological reasons why this happens if you want to know more. Now, I'd like to go over some reasons why you'd want to have a pistol to go with your rifle. Bolt-action rifles, like revolvers, are not above jamming. They are mechanical devices that can fail just like semi-autos are. Which is why I have 3 cases of bolt-actions jamming, and consequently almost costing someone their life. A 6.5 Mannlicher Schonauer rifle jammed due to a small piece of grit in the action. Thankfully, another hunter killed this bear before anyone was hurt. A .338 Ultramag rifle jammed due to an empty casing that was caught in the action. This hunter had to resort to his .454 Casull revolver to stop the attack. And finally, we have a bolt action that was jammed by the user who was under high stress. Thankfully, the guide was ready and killed the grizzly before anyone was hurt. As for why the revolver was jammed, I do not know the reason. Anyhow, bolt actions and pump actions are easily jammed when an excited shooter does not cycle the action completely. If you have a reliable semi-auto rifle or shotgun, you could totally avoid such stress-induced problems. My point here is that many people hunt with bolt-action rifles. If that rifle were to jam, it would be a good idea to have a handgun as a backup. Mike Adams is a bow hunter who was attacked by a bear. The bear had Mike's left arm in its jaws, so he couldn't grab his bear spray. He had to use his non-dominant hand to grab his handgun. He then fired shots that scared the bear off, even though they didn't seem to have hit it. Now, you need both hands to work a bolt action, so if a bear damages or breaks an arm, you're going to need a handgun that you can use with one hand. It's cases like these that create a good argument for having a handgun on each hip, so you can always have a gun available for each hand. When Rick Hollingsworth was elk hunting, a bear charged him. He shot all of the 3 rounds in his rifle from the hip. Then he kept the bear at bay by shoving the barrel of his empty rifle into its mouth, apparently stunning it. When the bear backed 20 yards away, Rick had the chance to reload and fire one last bullet into the bear, which then walked off and eventually died. There are many hunters with higher magnification scopes and relatively low capacity rifles. This makes close-range bear defense mostly impractical. For these folks, it may be more practical to carry a handgun in addition to their rifle. Bears can also attack from the side or from behind, which means that there is a good chance that you will get knocked face down. This means that the combined weight of your body and the bear that's on your back will pin down the rifle that's in your hands under you. Gary Corral experienced this sort of problem firsthand when a bear knocked him face down and started attacking his backpack. He had to take his hunting rifle out from underneath his body and shoot blindly behind him, which stopped the bear from attacking him. If Gary had a handgun on his hip, it would have been a lot easier to access and maneuver than a rifle. By the way, chest holsters are best used when you have a backpack or waders that would interfere with a regular holster. Ideally, you'd want the victim to end the attack by shooting the bear himself. There are a few reasons for this, which I'll explain shortly. But first, people may doubt that you could actually stop a bear that's actively mauling you with just a handgun, so I have a couple cases to prove that it's feasible and effective. The first case was when Lee Francis fired multiple rounds, which scared the bear away. He did accidentally shoot himself in the process, by the way. The second case was when Lewis Kiss was helping relocate a bear. The bear turned on Lewis and was mauling him as Lewis was shooting it. The last round Lewis fired was under the grizzly's chin, and it was the one that ended the fight. The last case is that of Bob Johnson's. After he was mauled by a grizzly, the bear came back for a second attack. Bob shot it once, which immediately killed it. He fired a couple more rounds into it just to make sure it was dead though. The victim shooting the bear is a lot safer than someone else trying to shoot the bear and accidentally hitting the victim. For example, when a wounded grizzly lunged at Ty Bell, Steve Stevenson made a split-second decision to distract the bear by yelling at it. It did work because the bear started mauling Steve. Ty shot the bear, but one of those bullets passed through the bear and killed Steve. Also, in a separate attack, Claudia Huber was killed when one of the bullets that was shot at the attacking bear deflected off a tree branch and hit her. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever try to shoot an attacking bear while it's on the victim, but rather you should only take the safest shots you can. The attack on Jess Coltharp is a good example of how quick thinking and luck can give you a good opportunity to shoot safely. Jess jumped to the side before the attack, so Anthony could get a clear shot and have no risk of hitting Jess in the torso or head. This is also a cautionary tale about why you should keep a round in the chamber and keep your gun in your hands when visibility is limited. If you can't have the victim shoot the bear or shoot the bear yourself, this is the situation where bear spray is most useful. The bear spray will probably affect the bear enough that it gets off the victim, which gives you the opportunity to shoot it. The spray will almost certainly also affect the victim and leave them almost entirely helpless though. But even this situation has caveats. First of all, bear spray is more likely to work if it's a surprise bear attacking defensively, as opposed to a predatory attack. I say this because I have not found a single case in which bear spray has stopped a predatory attack. If one of you viewers knows of such a case, please mention it in the comment section. You may ask yourself, why does this matter though? Predatory bear attacks are incredibly rare. Now, for this section, I'll be talking specifically about black bears. First of all, predatory attacks are more dangerous and have resulted in more deaths than defensive attacks. Second of all, bears that don't fear humans and associate people with food are not affected by bear spray. This may help to explain why I haven't been able to find bear spray actually stopping a predatory attack. So, when people are told that defensive attacks are more common, therefore you should worry about them more, then they are told that you should just carry bear spray because it's more effective than a gun. Obviously, this results in people being unprepared for the predatory attacks that result in more deaths. With all that said, bear spray has stopped some active maulings, and these cases are proof. Remember, if you have bear spray, don't ever carry it in your backpack. Carry it where it's quickly accessible. The first case with the son and mother is also an example of why even if you're making noise, it won't always prevent every attack, so you shouldn't let your guard down. There is another option to stop a bear from mauling a victim, but it's dangerous. You can yell at the bear and the bear will likely charge you instead of the original victim. To increase the time you have to shoot the bear, you'd want to back away a good distance before you yell. Just to be clear here, there is no guarantee that the bear will stop mauling the victim if you yell, but there is a good chance that it'll work. The attack on Robbie and Chris teach us multiple lessons. They had a large advantage in the fact that they saw the bear from a good distance. However, this advantage was almost completely and immediately lost by the fact that their rifles were not easy to access. In this podcast, Robbie mentions that there is a way to attach your rifle to your pack with a coat hanger so it's easily accessible, but he doesn't go into much detail about how to do this. Robbie also mentioned how he panicked after he realized there was no ammo in his gun. This happened because he didn't have a round in the chamber and the mag got knocked out when he tore his rifle from the pack. Robbie was relatively calm before this and would have been able to take a stable shot, but after he panicked, he was in no shape to make a good shot. So you should keep a round in the chamber and use all your focus on the task at hand to avoid panicking. One of the things Robbie really stressed was important was having an in-reach satellite device so you can call for help. It's important to have this because in many backcountry areas, cell service is not good, and not being able to call for help could be a death sentence if you're not able to walk far due to your injuries. Finally, Robbie also mentions how bears in some areas will come to the sound of a gunshot. This is because they've lost their fear of humans and have learned that a gunshot means that there will be food, that food being an animal's gut pile. With that in mind, some people say you should use warning shots to scare away bears. Warning shots can work, but they are not consistently effective. This chart is specifically about deterring polar bears, by the way. Steve Nelson explains that he has found warning shots to usually not be effective, and that they can trigger a charge instead of preventing one. He speaks from personal experience as this very thing happened to him. Thankfully, the charging bear veered away at the last second. This same polar bear chart says that capsaicin sprays, aka bear spray, should not be relied upon for personal protection. By the way, I'm sorry if the letters are small and blurry. I enlarged the chart to make it easier to read. There also seems to be some disagreement about where to shoot a charging bear. Some say that you should shoot the brain to stop the threat fast. Some say to shoot the shoulder first to slow it down. These quotes are about hunting bears, not bear defense, but the anatomy of the bear and the effectiveness of the different shots still hold true. If you only have time for one shot, where would you shoot? A shoulder shot would probably slow the bear down, but it may not give you enough time for a second shot. Trying to get a shoulder shot that also hits vitals when the bear is charging at you is not likely or repeatable. For one, it's hard to get the angle right when you're hunting a bear, which is why Jim Shockey doesn't recommend a shoulder shot. As Ryan Lampers said, anything shot in the shoulder that doesn't touch vitals, most likely that's going to be a bear that you never recover. Ryan also said, bears are tough if you hit them in the shoulder. They can run forever. Ryan explained in the interview that bears are not actually tough, but that poor shot placement can make them seem tough. Again, this article is about hunting bears. Regardless, a bear's brain is a small target and is easy to miss. I know there's no point of reference, but maybe this polar bear skull can help illustrate how small the brain case is in relation to how a bear's head normally looks. All the muscle, fat, and fur on a bear's head can mislead people into thinking that a brain shot would be easy with such a large head. This is a blurry picture of an actual bear charge. The bear had just been calmly sitting there before it decided to charge at the person videoing it. You should keep that in mind when somebody tries to tell you that bears are always predictable. Notice how the bear's head is held low, roughly in the center of its body. When it runs at you, its head will be slightly bobbing up and down. I've heard some people say that the best way to shoot into a bear's brain is right up through its nose. I don't think this is very easily achieved though. Look at how its nose is not directly pointed forward, but rather angled down at the ground. This picture demonstrates the correct place to make a brain shot on a bear. Also, if you look at the description, it mentions how you should only try to shoot the head of an immobilized or injured bear. Obviously, if the bear is standing still, you can also try to make a brain shot. The syllabus for firearm safety training says the following. More likely, the bear will be moving, and the head will become a difficult, if not impossible, shot for most shooters under stress. The most reliable defensive method is to shoot center of mass. Lewis is in charge of tracking and killing wounded bears. If he didn't know what he was doing, he'd be dead. A point driven home by the fact that the majority of the bears he deals with are injured by people in defense of life or property. This is why I put a lot of value in his decision to shoot center of mass. The encounter that the article describes was a very close and very fast affair, as many bear attacks are. This sort of encounter demonstrates that if you have people with you who are all armed and aware, you can survive despite the fact that the attacking bear was both lying in wait and was very close. I made sure to include the fact that Lewis used a Remington 870 loaded with ounce and an eighth Brennecke Classic Magnums. This diagram can help you visualize the center of mass area you should shoot. Remember, the bear's head will likely be low if it charges you. If the bear is charging at a friend and not directly at you, you may have more of a side shot. In a real attack, I wouldn't bother waiting for the leg to be out of the way, as the description says. You just won't have any extra time. Some people say that you should kneel down before you shoot a charging bear. The logic here is that the bear is moving so quickly that you'll likely just shoot over its back if you're standing. This theory makes sense as long as you don't think about it too much, and I'll use an analogy to explain why. Whitetail also run pretty fast. They can run up to about 35 miles per hour. If you're hunting whitetail and you spook one at close range and it starts running away, are you going to kneel down to be at the same level, or are you just going to shoot it? Kneeling actually gives you stability at the cost of time, a bargain that doesn't make sense for most bear attacks. It would only make sense if you see a bear charging at you from a longer distance, a distance that would require stability to actually hit the bear. I have this bear attack story here to demonstrate that attacks can be very close. It also seemed that the hiker was firing the revolver single action, which resulted in the hiker only having enough time to fire 2 shots. Some people are also concerned about the nightmarish scenario of being attacked while they're sleeping. The first big takeaway from this sort of attack is that if you go to sleep with your pistol next to you, the bear can easily knock that pistol out of reach. This is not really a problem if the pistol is in a holster and on your person. Now, Stephen Vouch also came to the conclusion that he'd be better off in a tent instead of just sleeping out in the open. But how could a tent offer any protection? Surely a thin piece of nylon is nothing to a bear. This CamoCheck article mentions how that the data shows most people injured at campsites were not in their tents, but were sleeping out in the open. This article fails to mention a source or any helpful details. A better conclusion from the data is that people get attacked regardless of how they sleep, but you are safer if you aren't sleeping next to food. Having food lying around is one of the things that would land you in the improper behavior category. If you don't have any food around, then there is a chance that the bear wants to eat you instead. For example, the separate cases of Leah Loken and Dylan. The bear that attacked Dylan intended to drag Dylan away to be eaten in peace before the other campers intervened. Leah Loken wasn't as lucky. She only had bear spray, which failed to stop the attack. She unfortunately didn't survive. What you really need to keep you safe at night is an electric fence around your camp. This can even keep out polar bears. This article says that some people have had grounding problems with electric fences during winter months. Thankfully, there is an easy solution. You can just put a ground wire close to every hot wire on the fence, and the bear will likely touch both at once. I also want to mention the fact that many times you have no idea what sort of situation you are walking into. You don't know if there have been so-called problem bears relocated to the area you're in. You don't know what sort of stupid and dangerous things people have been doing there, like feeding the bears, for example. Another good example is the story on the screen, in which 3 hikers started running from a bear, which naturally chased them. Thankfully, a ranger told them what to do, and they weren't hurt. That same bear went after a different group of people, all of whom instantly played dead until one of them got bit. Then they yelled at the bear and drove it away. This bear was eventually killed because it was dangerous. This is something you should think about before you go and do something dangerous like running, jogging, or mountain biking in bear country. There are things that you can do that reduces some of this danger, like traveling in groups and slowing down at blind corners, but it's still increasing your odds of an attack. Now, I'd like to go over some tips to help keep you alive. First of all, you should travel with multiple armed people. Bear attacks will be less likely and you'll have a better chance to kill an attacking bear before it kills you. You also want to have your weapon ready and in your hands when visibility is low. This is because you'll have less time to react, and bear attacks are more common in such low visibility areas like thick brush. After Game Warden Chris Queen had to bear spray a charging sow, he started carrying the spray in his hands when he can't see more than 50 yards ahead. Also, he carries 2 cans of spray in case there is more than one bear. The quicker you see a bear, the quicker you can respond. So if you're aware of your surroundings and you're lucky, you can prevent an attack just by avoiding an area that has recent bear signs. And you should never run. If you're running, you're acting like prey. It almost goes without saying that you should have a round in the chamber and your weapon easily accessible. If you plan on getting a good night's sleep, I'd put an electric fence around your camp too. Since defensive bear attacks happen so fast, if you're not paying attention, all you'll see is a blur and you'll feel something massive hit you. If you are paying attention, you can have seconds or more to respond. Remember, if you've caused a defensive grizzly attack and you're unarmed, get prone, cover your neck, and play dead. Predatory attacks usually start with the bear stalking you. It'll keep getting closer and may wait for you to turn your back before it strikes quickly. If a bear is stalking you like this, make sure you choose when the fight starts, and make sure your first shot counts. You may be able to keep backing away for a short distance, but don't think you'll be able to walk backwards all the way to civilization, because if you trip and fall, that may be it for you. You should also keep making loud noises, especially near streams that can be noisy. I'd suggest getting a recording of your favorite talk show or podcast and playing it loudly while you're hiking. You also want to do more basic things, like carrying a Garmin InReach to call for help, as well as a first aid kit in case you get mauled. Also, if you stumble onto a bear at close range and the bear hasn't seen you, the best thing you can do is ready your weapon and slowly back away so that it doesn't notice you. If it has seen you but hasn't charged you, talk to it so that it knows you're human. You don't need to shout unless it's acting aggressively, for example. I also want to give some safety tips specifically for hunters in bear country. First of all, you should hunt with multiple people and keep everyone within view of one another. Now, remember, coming back to a meat cache is very dangerous, so you should make lots of noise and be ready for an attack when you return. Also, if you're cutting up meat, you should really have somebody armed and on the lookout. If you can't do that, set a timer that goes off every few minutes. This will be your reminder to just take a moment and look around. Now, at least one person in your hunting group should have a Garmin InReach so that they can call for help. It would be ideal if everyone had one, because if only one person has an InReach, it could get broken if that guy gets mauled. Also, you should always assume that a bear smelled the prey you have just shot and will be there when you get there. Approach cautiously. As with any camping trip, you should let somebody know where you'll be going and when you'll be back. Make sure to keep the meat at least 100 yards away and downwind from your camp. You should try to get the meat out of reach, and if you can't, at least have it within sight of the camp so that you know if it's been disturbed. It would also be ideal to have an electric fence around the meat, by the way. You also want to do other things like not leaving a blood trail, moving the meat well away from the gut pile. Also, if you're done cutting up meat and getting blood on you, get those clothes off as soon as you can so you're not walking around camp smelling like food to a bear.